And I'm Linda Oliva, and we're very happy to be here. We're very cognizant that this is the last presentation of the day, so we're going to be brief.
We're from the Cyber Defense Lab at UMBC.
And we worked with a very diverse team. My expertise is in education. I'm a teacher educator. I was so excited to see other teacher educators here today. The world that we live in is all about standards-based assessment, revealing learning. So I really encourage you to kind of think about interesting interdisciplinary projects to work on together, like this one.
The faculty investigators in this project include myself. I'm an expert in cybersecurity, Linda from the Department of Education, and our colleague Marc Olano, who heads the game track at UMBC and is an expert in graphics and game design. We have also a set of students at all levels, including students from visual arts and computer science and music. We've fielded the game SecurityEmpire at 2 local high schools in Anne Arundel County, Meade High School and Chesapeake High School.
So our game is a little bit different than some of the games that we've talked about today, so we're glad to have a chance to add to the discussion and the exploration of the potential of games in cybersecurity.
Our main contribution is that we've developed, fielded, and done some preliminary evaluation of a new digital game called SecurityEmpire. This is an interactive, multi-person game, which was originally designed to be played in a classroom. It's designed to be played by high school students with no prior experience in cybersecurity. The distinguishing, in my opinion, the most important distinguishing characteristic of this game is that it, in an engaging way, creates teachable moments in an authentic way. So we don't artificially reward players by giving them points because they perform certain actions because we told them to. Rather, we create a business environment, which will be scored by money, in which if the companies engage in sound cybersecurity practices, then they'll have an inherent advantage in the game.
Okay, so Alan, how are we going to structure the presentation today?
Well, we'll first talk a little bit about how the game differs from some of the other games you've heard about. And it is a computer game, so we'd like to explain why we made that choice. We'll talk about the learning objectives and specifically the security concepts that the game teaches.
We're also going to actually show you some screenshots and explain the gameplay and the teachable moments that we have created. And we'll discuss how we used evaluation both in the formative process during the game development as well as when we reach certain developmental milestones.
And after a discussion, we'd like to invite you to a game playing session which will take place immediately after the closing of this workshop. And that session can be played on your browser and it'll take about 15 minutes.
Okay.
In contrast with the interesting game we just heard about and Cyber Siege, our game is designed for people with no prior experience in cybersecurity. And it's a multi-person game. There has been a trend for some game designers to go to card games or board games. We chose a computer game.
And the reason why we chose a computer game is that our students are digital natives. They live on they do a lot of the business of their lives on the computer. And we did some initial surveys with the students at the local high schools and found that the time that they spent playing board games was very small compared to the amount of time that they were online playing games. So that was one of the reasons why we wanted to do a computer game.
We also feel that we have the potential to make a bigger impact because it's easier to disseminate and duplicate the game, although I think it is a lot more work to create the game in digital form.
And we did have a lot of advantage in the sense that as we developed the game, we're constantly revising it and making changes based on the evaluation. So the ability to, have a dynamic nature to the development of the game has really been a very good strength for us.
The main concepts the game teaches are some basic concepts in cybersecurity, such as confidentiality, authentication, integrity, and availability, and most importantly, the DHS message of stop, think before you click. And all of these are taught in an authentic fashion in the context of a business competition. And how are these concepts aligned with other standards?
Well, because we are working with schools, we worked with the teachers to look at the other standards that they are using in their for their students, the learning outcomes that they are using. I'm sorry that this is happening here. So we looked at standards from the ISTE, from digital citizenship, and the computer science AP curriculum. And this was really helpful because it helped us kind of see the alignment of some of these standards to the security concepts we already knew about. But it also gave us a basis for trying to at least establish a preliminary pre-test, post-test, and look at ways of assessing their skills and their knowledge.
We'd now like to show you how the game works. This is a picture taken of a game session in June at UMBC. We're describing the classroom game where maybe 15 to 30 people in the same room would be playing the same instance of the game simultaneously. It begins with a login screen where each player has to create a username and a password. These passwords, by the way, come to play later in the game because at some moments of the game, the evil Chaos Empire will try to crack the password they used, and if it succeeds, certain bad things will happen to their company.
So the narrative of the game is based on the fact that each player is an owner of an energy-producing company, and they are creating their empire by building these components to generate electricity through wind, geothermal, and solar.
Inspiration for this game, at least for the gameplay mechanics, was drawn from proven successful games, including Monopoly and Rummy.
So when players log on, they see this business status report. This is how their business is doing. And you can see that there is a list of components for each of the systems that are stretched along here. You need 6 components to build each system. So if it's grayed out, you don't have it yet. If you have a +1 on it, you have an extra one. So when you get a set of these components, you can build your wind or solar or geothermal unit, and then that unit starts producing money for you.
On the upper left-hand corner is a summary of how you stand in the game, and that status report includes your total net worth, the cash on hand for buying parts, the number of energy systems that you've built, and as security metrics, the number of times you've fallen victim to some security scam, and the number of scams you've avoided.
And you can see that there are also some tabs up in this upper right-hand corner, and those are going to take you to different screens. So for example, this is the marketplace, and this is where you would go to buy the components that you need to build your system. It's also where you see here on the right-hand side the items that you have up for sale. And it's a very dynamic screen here because you can see different prices for different items that the players have made. And you can also change your prices based on that market. So there's a lot going on.
Scoring and ranking is done by the total net worth of your company. That's the bottom line. Now, during the course of business transactions, various things can happen. For example, right here you see a pop-up window which congratulates you on winning a $200 prize and asks if you want to go to the website to collect this prize.
So during this frantic pace of play, players have to make an important choice. And if they make the wrong choice, they get penalized.
And the penalty can be monetary. They may have to pay a security company to clean up their computers, and it also often involves a time penalty. While the computers are down, they're unable to transact business. And this can be very significant given the fast pace of the game.
Right, and this is an important component because the premise of the game is that good cybersecurity practices gives you an advantage. So when you are locked out of participating in any business for a period of time, that does impact your performance in the game.
All of the malicious acts are attributed to the fictitious entity, chaos. Some people may wonder why we didn't have students engage in attacks, and the main reason for that was, however interesting that may be, we had to comply with county school policies which forbid students from engaging in adversarial activities against others. If a student successfully avoids a scam, they get a positive reinforcement message with some explanation of how they avoided this. One of the tabs they can go to is the Security Center. That's a place where they can learn about security tools and concepts and purchase security software. For example, they can buy software for encryption, authentication, integrity checking, and so forth, backup software. And one of the interesting parts of the game is that each player must manage her own budget, allocating the money for security products or buying more parts. And that aspect of the game mirrors the unsolved real-life problem of how does a business sensibly manage their own budget in that regard.
So every decision that you make about what you get in the Security Center has impact for you throughout the game.
And for each type of product, there'll be some choices at different cost performance levels. We don't have time in this talk to show you all the things that can happen. We'll show you at least one more, but the adverse events include things like natural disasters, which may wipe out their system, and if they're not backed up, this could be a problem. Chaos could try to subvert the system software, which they might want to check with integrity checking software, and so forth. If they have to update their software, they should be sure to make sure they're dealing with an authenticated update site.
Another feature that we have in the game is we have included auctions, and these are periodic opportunities to buy completed units at a very discounted price. So to engage in the auctions, you're going to be presented with some important choices to make.
This creates a couple learning moments. Well, the first thing that happens is when an auction starts, each player will be asked if they want to proceed to the auction at the given URL. Well, maybe this is a legitimate URL, or maybe it's a phishing scam of some sort. Another thing that happens at the auction is when they place a bid, they have the choice of encrypting the bid or not encrypting the bid. To encrypt, they would have to have purchased the encryption software. And if they don't encrypt the bid, then all the other players can see their bid, and there's the potential that the other players then could use that strategically against the bidder.
So these are timed, and so all of the bids are listed, and you can really kind of optimize your chance of winning the auction by encrypting your bid and also taking advantage of the time window that you have.
There are a variety of rewards in the game, besides the ultimate reward of earning money and winning the game. One of these rewards is whenever they complete an energy system, an animation pops up to congratulate them for doing this. And some of these animations show the different parts that go into a system, so it has that secondary learning advantage.
This is an example of the leaderboard. This summarizes the information that's always available in the corner during play, but this gives a little bit more detailed information about the net worth and liquidity of all of the components, all of the players.
And the ranking of all the players. We built this game in two parts. There's a front-end and a back end. All the game logic is in the back end, which is a database. The front end simply displays the current state of the game. The front end is done through just standard browsers. And a significant advantage of that setup is that no special software need be loaded onto the player's computer.
We also did the illustrations, our artist did the illustrations with Adobe Illustrator and used Adobe Flash for the animations. Now, we've had a focus on evaluation throughout the development process, and even though the game is a moving target in the sense that it's always evolving, so it's difficult to have a series of evaluations that are valid and generalizable, but the focus on trying to use player feedback to continually update the game and revise and to add components has really been a very valuable part for us. And we've used things like the game metrics. We've looked at observation of gameplay. We go in and sometimes record and often always watch what's happening during the game. We do surveys, and we also had done group interviews after the game session. We have, when we finished the game at a certain point, we brought it back to the schools and did a more formal repetition of those methodologies. And the most important thing I think we found was that the students were very engaged in the game. And that is important because you cannot teach anybody anything unless you have their attention and their sustained attention. So the fact that they enjoy the game and they persist and they try and they have these moments is really a powerful thing. And here's an example from some of the surveys. You can see the overwhelming positive response to aspects of the games that they enjoyed.
The evaluation of the game is still ongoing, and but tentatively, it is striking that students enjoy the game, they're engaged, and it seems to be that the basic premise of creating these teachable moments through authentic motivations seems to be working well. As I mentioned earlier, I think it's interesting when the game models a difficult unsolved problem such as how do you best spend your budget on security.
We had some real powerful partnerships with the schools, and it was a little bit of a challenge because schools have a lot of paranoia about their systems and their infrastructure. So when we went to the school and said, hey, we have a great idea for a game, we haven't developed it yet, but we want to run it from in your classroom. It was like, wait. So, because we've had a good relationship and because the education department is actually has a formal partnership with this school, we were able to kind of navigate those treacherous waters. And in the end, the school was very receptive and grateful to us for the chance to work together.
At first, we actually went to a different school with a different result, and we had couched the game as possibly using the Facebook software not connected to the internet. And as soon as you mention the word Facebook to a school system, they don't like it. And so we rephrased our pitch later. The Anne Arundel County school system was very flexible with us. Their policies expect you to have a final testable product at the beginning, but we were asking them to work with us to develop this product that didn't exist. They gave us a series of concerns, and we complied with those concerns, such as not allowing students to harass each other, not allowing students to connect to the internet, having a dedicated server which would only accept IP addresses from the school.
And we also gave the role, the teacher, an important oversee of the game, which was very helpful.
Sometimes we found it frustrating that the students are used to playing these commercial games that were developed with hundreds, if not thousands, of workers and maybe a $100 million budget. And here we are at a shoestring budget with a small staff. But that's just the way it is, I guess. Maybe someday we could partner with a company to add that extra polish.
So where are we headed?
This summer, we started developing a variation of this game which will be used on mobile systems, especially tablets. It would be an asynchronous game, not requiring all the players to be in the same room at the same time, and also allowing the potential for a much larger number of people to play a game session. We're also improving the game by adding sounds and richer graphics. One of the things we found out about the original classroom game is that the students were very good at gaming the game. For example, they quickly found out that it turned out to be a good strategy at the beginning of the game just to go to the store and buy all of the most expensive security products and then not worry about security for the rest of the game. Or to make a lot of money by buying low and selling high without worrying about security. And so we've modified the game so that as your company gets richer, that the severity and the complexity of the threats will grow, and the way you have to defend against them requires more sophisticated software. And also, we try to ensure that even if you have the insurance of software protection, that doesn't guarantee you against attack.
And we also want to continue to evolve with the evaluation by doing a pre-test and post-test, which is a very challenging thing. But I think with the focus we have on the learning outcomes that we're specifically, targeting, we have an opportunity to create meaningful data. We also have the opportunity to compare how it works online versus in the classroom, and we're very optimistic about the opportunities that we have coming our way.
I think one of the most important questions we wish to answer is it the case that if people play this game, that then when they go on the internet, they behave more safely? We don't yet have data to answer that question. We'd like to thank our We'd like to thank our sponsors. This research was supported in part by NSA under 2 ISAP grants and by the National Science Foundation under an NSF grant. We welcome your comments and feedback.
So, thank you. A question I had that I didn't quite follow as you were presenting is, it wasn't clear to me when the player was going to get the "you've been scammed" versus the real, did you have multiple URLs that they were going to when they were invited to a website? How does someone know what's happening there?
During the game, random events happen. And so, for example, for the URL directing them to the auction, randomly, some of the URLs are good and some of them are bad.
Okay.
And they either have software that helps protect against that or they don't. And regardless, different outcomes can happen.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. Your screenshots look great. I think there's a big indie games movement that's really going for you, even if you look at the big guys and lament their budgets.
Thanks. Well, I think it really did help to have an artist and a musician on board.
You mentioned how the teacher account has some better oversight.
Yes.
Is the version that you let people play online also available to hand out teacher accounts if we wanted to go to schools?
All of our software is open source and available, so anybody can take the software and download it and modify it. But the game that we actually serve does not give the users the teacher capability.
Okay.
So
so that's just for the
of
schools
what the
you're
teacher
working
can
with.
do. So maybe the teacher wants to focus education on certain concepts, and so she could select what types of scams might appear and which ones might not appear, and she could also cause certain events to happen. Also, to comply with policy, the one place in the game where students can create their own message is when they select their username. And so before that student is allowed to continue, the teacher has to okay the choice of username.
Thank you.